How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about some Jeep myths. I've heard this all out through my life about these myths that we're going to be talking about today. So if you're looking into buying a Jeep, this goes for all the Jeeps across the board, or a Wrangler or a Cherokee. This video is for you because a lot of times people will steer away from buying a Jeep because of these myths that we're getting ready to talk about. So the first myth that I want to talk about is driving a Jeep daily. Now, they've come out with tons of models that you can drive daily for comfort. You know, you got the new Grand Cherokee, you got the new Cherokee, you even have the old Patriots, you have the new Renegades. That is a luxury Jeep vehicle. That is something you can take your family on vacation, take your family to the beach, to a camping spot, and it drives perfect. They're great on gas, and you know, they're great in rain and snow and the wind. It's just an all-around vehicle. Now, when we come to the older Cherokees like that I have and the Wranglers, a lot of people say you can't drive them daily. They don't drive like a vehicle, and that is somewhat true and somewhat false. I have a four-door Wrangler that is lifted 2.5 inches with 35s on it, and that thing we take everywhere. We take it on trips, we take it grocery shopping. It's a daily driver, and that thing drives just as good as any other new Jeep that's out there. And I think where people get misinformed is how they're built. The Wranglers and the old Cherokees like I have are a straight axle design, so they're going to have a little bit different handling compared to the new independent suspension on these newer Jeeps that are out there. And especially if you lift them up a little bit, because you got to think, a Cherokee, the old Cherokees and the older Wranglers and the newer Wranglers like mine are square, and they're going to handle just a little bit different. That doesn't mean you can't drive it daily. It's all new challenge. And honestly, that is a myth. You can drive them daily. Even my Jeep that's lifted 3 inches with 35s, we've taken it on a trip. We've, did all kinds of stuff in that thing, and I drive it on the road. And it handles a little bit different, but it's not going to be like a Cadillac. But that is a myth. You can't drive a Wrangler or an old Cherokee daily because they are only meant for off-road. That is false. That is not true. That is something that somebody come up with, and you can drive them daily. They just handle a little bit different. There's going to be a little bit more play just because how the body rolls, and it's a straight axle design in the front end. Another myth that I always hear, the reason why I don't buy Jeeps because they are top heavy. Now, this was the case back when the CJs were made. They were very narrow and they were kind of top heavy, and they were easy to flop over, even in the woods and even on the blacktop. They were super easy to flop over, and even the old generation, the first generation Wranglers, there was some flopovers with that, but not as bad. But when it comes to the 90s and 2000 models and up Wranglers and the Cherokees, they're just like any other vehicle. They're hard to roll, and honestly, you're not going to roll one unless it's lifted super high and you're acting silly with it, and it'll roll. But there's a lot more safety nowadays, and it's very unlikely that you're going to roll the Wranglers or the old Cherokees like I have. It's just not going to happen. So don't let that stop you from buying a Jeep. That is another myth that somebody come up with. Just because the old CJ 7s and stuff like that were easy to roll doesn't mean the newer Jeeps are. Now, I hear this one all the time. Jeeps are unreliable. Now, even the newer Jeeps are super reliable. The old Cherokees, the old Wranglers, they were reliable. The straight sixes, the old 4.0s, them things were so reliable that they have 400, 500,000 miles on them, and people are still trucking in them. I don't know where that comes from. Honestly, what I think it comes from is people buying them used with a lot of miles racked up on them, and no maintenance done to them, and stuff just breaks. And a lot of aftermarket parts that you buy, like, I'm not mentioning any cheap lift names, but a lot of people buy cheap lift kits, put them on there, and they'll say, well, that's unreliable. If you're replacing stuff with aftermarket stuff, you really can't accuse Jeep for that. That's your fault for buying cheaper products to put on your Jeep. But when it comes to buying a stock Jeep and you buy it and it gives you problems, trust me, you can go back on my channel and see the problems I've had with several different model Jeeps, the Grand Cherokees that I've had, the XJs, the Wranglers. That's because lack of maintenance, and somebody's just drove this thing right into the ground. And we fixed a lot of those, don't get me wrong. Think about it. When you buy a used Jeep, they'll tell you they change the oil every 3,500 miles. That's great, but what about the transmission fluid? What about the diff fluid? What about all this other stuff, like the front end maintenance, the wheel bearings? People don't think about that stuff. I check this stuff all the time when it comes to my Cherokee, my Wranglers, even this old truck here. I always try to make sure the maintenance is upkept. That way it's reliable and I don't let it pile up, because what happens is people have this idea that Jeep is reliable, especially a young kid. I'm guilty of this myself when I was younger. And we'll run this thing, all the axle's leaking, just keep adding fluid. All this is leaking, just keep adding fluid. Keep running it, run it, run it, run it, until all this stuff happens at one time. And then we're like, Jeeps are unreliable. So that person puts it up for sale. They make it to where the person can drive it home. A week later, they're having all these problems. I'll never buy a Jeep again. Well, honestly, that's your fault for thinking that, because you never really did the research, and you never really looked at what was wrong with the particular vehicle you were buying. This is with any vehicle. All Jeeps have problems. The 4.0s have little problems that with kept with maintenance you'll never see. The Cherokees have problems, but with maintenance you'll hardly see it. Even the new Wranglers, people dog me for the new 3.6 Pentastar motor. They're like, that thing's going to blow up. Honestly, maintenance is key. The new 3.6s, a lot of times you need to change the lifters about 100,000 miles. Easy job you can do in your driveway. Oil cooler is a bad design. It's all plastic. They have aluminum now. Change it in your driveway. And basically that's all the major problems that you have with the new 3.6s. The old 4.0s, just change the oil in it, keep the plugs changed, and honestly, you're good to go. I've seen them blow up, etc. Every vehicle, honestly, is going to have their problem. But when it comes to Jeep, they are super reliable, and you can't beat them for what they are and how many miles you can get out of. Another one that I hear all the time, the quality of Jeep is just garbage. It always has been. I'll have to disagree with you there, because honestly, when it comes to the Cherokee, if you go back and look at the old interior when they first come out, it was beyond its time. It was great. It was an all-around vehicle. Even when it came to the Wrangler, everybody's complaining how basic it was. But these things were meant to go in the mud, off-road, open the doors, spray them out, and there you go. It's clean again. A lot of people say they ride rough. Honestly, a stock Wrangler and a stock Cherokee, any stock older Jeep, will actually ride super decent if somebody took care of the suspension. They actually ride really, really good. My Wrangler, when I first bought it, was like driving a cloud because it was stock. Had the stock wheels and tires. It drove like a dream. And what it is, not to mention any names again, they'll buy cheap lift kits, put them on these, and cheap tires, and put them on these Jeeps, which there's totally nothing wrong with that, because this channel is all about being on a budget. But the vehicle will ride rough, and they'll complain about how, rough a Jeep rides. Honestly, that's just quality in parts. When they come off the showroom floor or their stock, they actually ride and drive really decent for what it is. That's why I always try to talk people into buying a quality lift kit, because for one, it's going to steer great, it's going to ride better, and it's going to take the bumps and the rocks and the road bumps and holes that you have in your state a lot better than a cheap lift kit. When it comes to a cheap lift kit, there's nothing wrong with it, but they skip steps and they make stuff just ride harder, and they don't really focus their time on making things ride smooth. They're just trying to get your vehicle off the ground for a certain amount of money, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But what you're sacrificing is, the ride, the quality of the vehicle, what it could be. They sacrifice all that. So when it comes to buying a lift kit, buy a quality lift kit. It will change the way you think about it and the way it drives and all that stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I just wanted to clear up some things that I always hear in the Jeep community about Jeeps. And I've heard many fathers say, I'm not going to buy my daughter a Wrangler because they're easy to roll over, they're unreliable. I've always heard all this stuff, and I wanted to clear it up a little bit. And honestly, a Jeep is super reliable. Even the new ones, they're reliable. It goes back to maintenance and whatever parts you put on there. Are they quality or are they cheap? And there's nothing wrong with buying cheap parts, but you have to accept the fact that it's going to ride rough, it's going to drive rough, it's going to be rough, and all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you can handle that, that's fine. When I was younger, I would do stuff cheap, and I went places other people went with a $5,000 lift. Older I get, I'm looking for more of a ride quality when I'm off-road, because the older you get, the more your bones and stuff hurt like that. So there's nothing wrong with cheap lifts, and there's nothing wrong with expensive lifts. I just wanted to clear up all these myths of Jeeps. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that little notification bell so you know each and every time I upload a video. I'm Cherokee Ronnie. Stay dirty, my friend.